As I said, I started my profession as a geneticist, and then I was moving to bioethics. So worked a lot with ethics on research and genomics on the government and health minister and technology minister and environmental minister. So I have a lot of contribution to our country on these issues related to genetics. And I choose where I can
push the other
okay. So I propose to think about genetic and transhumanism. First of all, I need to apologize for my poor English. I'm not English. English is not my first language, so I'd like to apologize if I have several doubts. Anyway, so the idea is when I chose this theme was to compare this intention or this new wave of thinking about using all technologies to enhance the man or the humankind. Artificial intelligence, several techniques, even cyborgs ones, and including gene editing. So we have a lot of techniques that can improve and enhance human beings. So this meaning is it's not new, but anyway, I'll try to link some philosophers that think about this issue. So we are talking about CRISPR since morning, the cluster regulatory interspace short palindrome repeat, a technique that was a tool. It's more a tool that was created in the 2015 by the two researchers, the American research Diniz in the French research. So the idea is to fix DNA. To fix DNA or to change or to knock out it, you need a special tool, the CRISPR. So here we have one figure of one representation. I like it because it's very color, and we can see the RNA and the DNA matching. So, but basically we have this enzyme, the Cas, CRISPR related enzyme. So this enzyme have this RNA that can find a special sequence on the DNA. So this is one special figure of the CRISPR, and basically the CRISPR will find a place in the genome and to cut this place, both parts of the double helix. So For doing this, the researchers, the both that were working together, they did a very short changing on the end of the RNA. So that's why we have a kind of almost artificial tool, but it's a copy of a natural tool that the bacteria and archobacteria use to cut virus RNA. So they started, I tried to cut several things because everybody is talking about the techniques, and I'll try to do my best cutting several things. And but I put a little sequence of the history, and I let some things. In 1987 were the first work. And I remember I wasn't the master, and we studied this article, but we couldn't understand well this sequence. So, but it was a very different thing people have found on the genome, on the E. coli genome. The sequence were exactly the same. I mean, the spacers were exactly the same. The change was in the interspaces sequence that bore this sequence that came from the virus, the sequence we can find in all the CRISPR. And then we have several other finds. In 2000, they found this CRISPR in bacteria, and then in 2002, Jensen creates this abbreviation. Before that, it was just called repeated sequence. Then we have this is the original work from 1987. They were published recently again, but the original one is here. It's a very old paper, and we can see this sequence, the repeated sequence. So I found this guy. It's still working at the university, so it's very important there. So this initial work showed just a sequence. Then the researchers were finding several other aspects. Then they start to see that this sequence had an extra chromosomal origin, or were not from the bacteria. So they studied a little bit more and discovered in 2015, Mojica discovered that it was a kind of immune system because of this characteristic of cutting the DNA. There are a lot of kind of system, a Cas system, but the best one, the Cas3, Cas10, but the easy, I mean, that have just one enzyme domain and one RNA is Cas9. It's the simple, or the most simple tool to do this manipulation. The other you need to have several steps, but all of them cut the virus RNA. So when the virus came into the cell, the E. coli, for example, they is cutted. Some parts of RNA is integrated to genome. Then the cell starts to produce the Cas9 and CRISPR. So next time when other virus came into the cell, he already have this enzyme to cut. So it's easy biological system. So here just one more figure, and here we can see, I think the doctor talked about changing parts of the DNA. You can do several things. You can look out DNA, making this system doing some mutations. For example, when they cut the DNA, they cut, and then the next step is to put together the space. So when they do this, the system of the bacteria is not that, the repair system is not that well. So sometimes you have some mutations. It's one of possibility. You can knock out one gene during the mutation, or you can cut the DNA. And for example, here we have this DNA donor. It's you need to put the CRISPR-Cas9 and CRISPR-Cas9 and the donor DNA all together in the cell. So this DNA can find and match the cutted areas. So it's very specific, just to show that it's a very sophisticated, but at the same time simple and very cheap way to manipulate DNA and to change DNA. And there are some people that even try to do in themselves. It's called cracker or something like this. Forgot the name, but it's kind of when you are inviting computers, you can be a racker or a tracker. That is the worst one. So they call the cracker gene these guys that want to do with this enzyme any changing their body, because the enzyme is very cheap and you can buy just sending the guys who send this just buying this enzyme. So everybody is trying to use this enzyme by now. So this is 2015. So those in Chapter, they modify a piece of the original CRISPR-Cas, so they introduce this new tool to manipulate DNA, any DNA, plants, animal, wherever, including human. So in 2000, it was in, I think in February, they published, and I think in November, Chen published a DNA editing in prokaryote. So the two papers were in the same year. That's why they didn't have the Nobel yet, because both have the patent being judged. So in 2016 they had no chance just because of this economic situation. But I think they are going to finally solve this question. Maybe the three would win together, you know. So, and in science they have every year they published the best paper or the best notice that or news that they have published during the year. In 2015, CRISPR-Cas was the most important video they published. So I put several papers and no news about this techniques, for example, controversial new gene editing technology could be win the Nobel, and this fighting between the guys and the guy and the girls make them being out of the Nobel. And so sorry for have not translate. I had original one, but anyway, it was not here. And CRISPR can be used for several things. For medicine, everybody have talked a lot about several possibilities. Xenotransplants, you can change the DNA from the pigs. Gene therapy, we saw some examples here. Cancer, it was another example. In the industry, we can have fuel production, new materials, new pharmaceuticals, and in agricultural and in vet area, we also have several uses. Drugs, animals, and to generate variability, genetic variability. It's amazing because for agricultural and for plants and for animal, people want to have more variability. If for human, they want to eliminate. Yeah. We saw this the work about the thalassemia, and the idea is just to eliminate thalassemia gene, the mutated thalassemia gene from our species. So I think it's a kind of contradictory this way of using the technique. I think that I'm geneticist, so I'm addicted of variability, even if the thing's very worst and have a lot of consequence. I believe that we should maintain the diversity. So in the basic research, we have several possibilities to identify function of genes and produce animal models, whatever. A lot of ways of using. So I got just one example about the Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It was changed by CRISPR, and also knockout of a mice gene, and several samples we have about CRISPR using here about to face cancer, and using here in a Brazilian laboratory to as a model the knockout gene to see what kind of consequence it would have, and so see what was the function of this gene. So, but continuing this discussion, let's see about CRISPR and bioethics. So I start with Potter too. In fact, I put jar. I take jar, but when I reached here, I couldn't find any more my jar. But because, as Daniel told, I agree with Daniel. Potter brings us the idea of putting together humanistic area to a technological area. And Jar was thinking about ethics to the earth, to saving it. Wow. Potter also was thinking about saving Earth, but in a different way. For me, they are very different. That's why I always try to start to Potter because it was, for me, it was more bigger than the idea of jar in 1927. Yeah, it was very before the war. And the Potter said, I took a little piece of the work, the original work, The Bridge to the Future, to following the idea. So he said, especially because we have now in Brazil a very huge problem to environmental, so he said polluted air and water, population exclusion, ecology, conservation, many voices speak, many definitions are given. Who is right? The idea interchange, and there are conflict arguments that confuse the question in daily action. What is the answer? Is man really putting his environment at risk? Would it be necessary to improve the condition he created? Is the threat to survival real, or is it all pure advertising of some hysterical theorists? So we can assume two ways of thinking about this: technophobic thinking or a technophilic thinking. I'm going to talk about this later. So, continuing to the idea of Potter, he told us something like, this new science, bioethics, combines the work of humanists and scientists whose objectives are wisdom and knowledge. Wisdom is defined as the know-how to use knowledge for social well-being. The pursuit of wisdom has a new orientation because humans survival is at issue. Ethical values must be tested in terms of future and cannot be divorced from biological factors. Actions that reduce the chance of human survival are more immoral and must be judged in terms of available knowledge and monitoring of survival parameters chosen by scientists and humanists together. So the question is, how to prepare for the gene editing era without, compromise human existence? That's the question. And thinking about this, we can have several possibilities thinking about eugenics. The doctor have already talked about eugenics. I think I can remember some of the speakers have already talked about eugenics. The idea of eliminating all the all the genes, for me it's a kind of I think it's a tendency to be eugenic. I mean, to eliminate the things we think is worse, but they are worse for this time. Maybe next time it could be an advantage to people who have this mutation. For example, anemia falciforme is an advantage to some population in Africa. So I don't know how we could discuss eugenic stuff, but it's not the issue by now. And biotechnoscience also would be thinking about this bioethics in CRISPR, because we have this technology that are changing the biological material, and this material, after the changing, will have their own evolution. So that's what biotechnoscience think about the consequence of changing biological material with technological tools. In transhumanism, that think that we should use all these thinking about eugenics or about biotechnoscience to enhance men to have a better species. Should I say species, but have a better human being. I like this, I like very much this paper. Is from a philosopher, Brazilian philosopher, not Brazilian, he was born in Switzerland and went to Brazil 40 years ago. But anyway, Sriram wrote this paper. It's kind of, is there any reason for being afraid of the biotechnoscience? That's the idea. In this paper, he talked a lot about this two position, two very contradictory position. People that love technology, is very humanist, and people that are afraid of technology. It's kind of phobia, so they call them technophobicals. So between these two possibilities, they suggest that we can use some principle to diminish this two tension. For example, the principle of precaution that is raised by the Moratorium in 17th. I'm going to show this, the origin of this principle, and the responsibility principle from Jonas that was proposed this principle at the year 16th. And so can the genetic enhance the human enhancement? So transhumanists believe that. So according to Porter, here is Porter, not Porter, it's a very new paper. He was talking about transhumanism and bioethics. So he wrote, transhumanism is a techno-progressive, social-political and intellectual movement that advocates for the use of technology in order to transform the human organism radically, with the ultimate goals of becoming post-human. So it's an idea of Nietzsche, we can see. To this end, transhumanists focus on and encourage the use of new and emerging technology, such as genetics and brain-machine interfaces. The use of CRISPR, the most precise and cheap way of changing genome, so-called gene edit, can accelerate the process of reaching the post-human life. So, I think the origin is in Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche. Okay. Friedrich Nietzsche. Thank you. They thought about Uber. Oh, please help me.
Ubermensch.
I don't know.
Superman.
Yeah, but I don't know speak German. Ubermensch. And that can be translated as overhuman.
Superman.
Or Superman. There are a lot of.
I think
I'm going to put.
Walter Kaufman, Nietzsche's standard translator, uses Superman.
See. I'm going to put in later. I try to use several.
I mean, majority of Nietzsche's works have been translated by Walter Kaufman.
Okay.
Superman.
Okay, I'm going to use it. So, but this guy was over. It's kind of a superation, being better. So it's the same idea, but anyway.
No, it's not the same idea. Nietzsche didn't mean being better as a human. It means going back to what really is human. To him, it is be able to transcend our...
So yes, being more than human.
No, not more than human, but going back to what it means to possess a will. The will to win over our selfishness, for instance. Anyways, maybe not related to that.
Well, it's actually an interesting discussion, because if it is going back to being a traditional human,
Yeah,
the
I
modified
think so.
human.
It's
It's
more
actually
the
the
mythical
opposite of what
man.
you're saying.
The mythical man.
Yeah, the mythical
Yeah.
man.
Well, because the first magazine that talk about bioethics, they put in the different way. So the original wrote. So if you can help me, feel free. So it was mentioned first in this paper, and the first using of the enzymes, they put this made into Superman, as you said, the premise and birth of the new genetics. So the same year they used the enzymes to cut DNA. They used the idea of being well, if you tell that it's so I don't know if it makes sense putting this way. For my understanding, for Nietzsche, it would be immoral not improving the human being. So we need a moral obligation to improve the next generation.
For Nietzsche, is one who is like a precursor of postmodernism. So you have to destroy these traditional conceptions of values. He thinks Christianity is some kind of slave morality. So that if you talk of transvaluation, it means that society should be open to a multiplicity of values, sort of a cultural relativist thing.
Okay.
So that from a Christian perspective, it would be manipulative, and so it should not be acceptable because it will violate human dignity. Man being a creature of God. But in the Nietzschean sense, you have to be open to these possibilities of values. When you do that, the transvaluation, you have no universal definition of values.
So I'll try. So as a result of such advantages, in 2015, a group leading biologists called for a global moratorium. So after being used CRISPR for several purposes, they had this purpose. But this moratorium, they discussed it. In fact, they didn't a moratorium to evaluate the CRISPR use. But they were more based on the moratorium that had in the years 70, when the first DNA manipulation was done by the enzymes in the E. coli. And so this moratorium that was in Brazilomar was composed by 140 scientists and several doctors and lawyers and journalists, even the Pomberg and the Baltimore, several Nobel Prize were there discussing this moratorium. And from this moratorium raised this idea of precaution principle. So that have been used, especially when we are talking about DNA. So the Chinese had published this paper. They have used the CRISPR to change the embryo of not a viable embryo. They had it was one oocyte with two spermatozoids, so it couldn't develop a woman. But anyway, they used the CRISPR and they published this in a local magazine or Then the several researchers started to talk about this research. So you must help me, because so it seems that I understand different. So Superman over Nietzsche, according to I understood, an overman should be able to affect himself indefinitely.
I think the word
Yeah, please.
It's very complicated to be able to explain that. He was talking of postmodernism. Nietzsche actually thinks that there is no end or goal or purpose to history. So it's like an infinite regress. So meaning
the
eternal recurrence.
Like
it repeats over and over.
So he assumed that we are not the end. He assumed that there is a
He assumes that there's no human
evolution.
essence, only becoming. So
And
you can do whatever
we
you
can
want.
do several things because it's not the final.
That's the similarity between Nietzsche and Buddhism, the idea of becoming. There is no eternal essence. Like in Christianity, you have an eternal God whose essence are just copies. In Nietzsche, you have to reject that idea of a God. And that's just man creating, making history over and over again, repeating himself.
So it's for every religion, if I should say, thinking human as an animal that is
No,
and
because
also
in Buddhism there is no God also.
no, just for having finished this part, so we can discuss.
Yeah, you can discuss another time. Yeah.
It's just to make a final.
Yeah, it's correct anyway. A man creates and recreates himself so that he becomes.
That's the meaning of the next generation is creating.
I don't think Nietzsche even talks about any generation or something to that effect.
Yes, but
because he has no systematic thinking. It comes to his mind. He likes it.
Yeah, okay.
He's a destroyer of system and thought.
Okay, I understood. The idea of bringing Nietzsche is to bring this idea of dynamicity.
I don't even find Nietzsche relevant to this type of research. If you invoke Nietzsche because you create a new human subject by manipulating the genes, you don't need Nietzsche. You can
several humanists consider Nietzsche
I understand, but it doesn't mean we accept their ideas.
Initial thinking about humanism. That's why I put here, because it's important to humanists having this.
I understand.
I think I want to just, with you to say, Nietzsche is an amazing philosopher, and from a medical perspective, it's very relevant to bring him in at this conjunction, because we have to remember Nietzsche struggled all his life, had tremendous physical, medical suffering, and therefore he pushed himself to this philosophy and embraced it in that Germanic time between Freud and Marx and then Nietzsche, this combination of people to say that the human can go beyond what nature has given him. And so he himself was struggling with the limitations of his physical body and his ill health, and strove very desperately to realize the higher potential of his own humanity.
Yes. That's meaning it's very important to go far, to transcend. For me, Nietzsche is kind of transcendence.
And
he said that one of the last things that I just heard a couple of days ago was Nietzsche said he got to where it wasn't so much that man was trying, thus spake Zarathustra, which is one of his books. It wasn't so much that humanity man was trying to realize the immortality afterlife, but to overcome all the levels of delusion because he himself was the Superman.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting juxtaposition. It's a very
Thank you.
interesting.
The idea is giving some argument to the transhumanists.
Yes.
Believe that you can, you will have the post-human kind
Yes.
that is product of our intervention. So some people believe, including that we are in the, they call it human xenon, that the humankind is going to end and we would have another era.
The transhuman
The post-human,
post-human.
yeah, that's the idea, and so you need to transcend to go further. So anyway, let's try to finish here and we can discuss. So the idea was bring this thinking about need to this possibility of real changing of human DNA. And Daniel, when you said we are changing one part, yes, we are just changing the material part. Woman, the man or the humankind are more than this, we know. But most of people believe in the genetics determinism. So what you have in your genome, you would have a disease, you would be more intelligent, you would be more successful, whatever. But even I don't agree with this idea because I'm geneticist. I know that some characteristics are multifactorial, so you would have the behavior and you would have even the spirit of whatever. But when you change one part, you change all. So for me, this idea of changing DNA, changing the genome, human genome. So thinking about genomic declaration from 1997 that tell in one of the parts that we have genome as a pattern, human pattern. It's a value that it's important. So for me, changing some part, you can change. It's another kind of discussion, but here the idea is thinking about the possibility of real change, because you are manipulating DNA with a very precise way, and you can change very dramatically the genetic material. So, just to justify, because you would think about this, but just
we agree on that.
What?
We agree on that point.
Yeah. So, in 2015, so that was the first manipulation, and several persons start to try to work with CRISPR in human, including United Kingdom. They approved a manipulation in embryos that they were viable. They were not like the Chinese one that were not viable. These were health embryos, but they were destroying the embryo after 5 days. It's another discussion if it is life or not life. I'm not going to discuss this, but in fact the government approved this manipulation. They did the manipulation, so here is the girl that did the manipulation. So we have, at that time we had several persons who was talking about CRISPR, germline engineering. I put this one because there are a lot of papers in one number of the Nature Biotechnology. So I'm going to leave with Daryl, so just try to read it. Very interesting it's all thinking about the CRISPR use. And here also we have another paper. So put several samples for justifying that we are really changing things. And sorry, because it is I didn't translate, but believe me, I'll try my best. So the question to be responded would be what way of using of this technology could compromise the future and diminish the change of survival of humanity. That's the idea. Can we use CRISPR? Yeah, I think, but does it really compromise our existence as this species? Because I'm pretty sure we are going to change all the things, and even we have in the future just holographic person, I don't know, because there are a lot of research on download and or whatever. But that's the question I'd like to discuss with you. And the fact of biological are there. So there is a necessity of thinking about the future use of this technique of editing genome of human. And according to Potter, the actions that diminish the change of survival are immoral and must be judged in terms of knowledge and monitoring the parameters of survival. So, I think we could stop here, or maybe, I don't know if I could put Nietzsche again, but get back to Potter. He wrote something like that. I ask of you is to think bioethics a new scientific ethics that combine modesty, responsibility, and competence in a interdisciplinary, intercultural perspective, and that reinforce the humanity sense. So that's initial meaning. I think we should try to follow. Even we have humanists that believe that we should use all the techniques to change our genetics material, our brain, our, I don't know, several possibilities. We should have a balance to deal with these techniques, because I agree with Nietzsche that we have a dynamic process that never ends. So even if it is dynamic, it never ends, we should take care and guarantee that it would go to the right way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nilza. By the way, would you like to introduce yourself? Thank you for coming. Yeah.
I'm Dr. Prasid Paltongkam. So I'm a medical geneticist, and I will talk about some of my own perspective about the genetics and the germline editing tomorrow.
Yep. Thank you for coming, and I was guessing from the lab coat you're a doctor.
This is my genetic counselor nurse. So she is trained with us, so she'll start into the fields to learn about the new technologies, and then the counseling point of view, which is very involved with the ethical perspective and the social implications.
You're welcome. Thank you. We're going to. Are there any questions for Nilza? Yes, Daniel, please.
Oh, so sorry.
More remarks than questions. Following your discussion, which I agree with, and I'll explain in which ways I agree. It was nice that you put a Time magazine cover with the Superman, because I was thinking, what were they talking about when they were referring to the Superman? And they were mainly thinking about how to remove some ailments or negativities that we might have in our genome. So it's not enhancing in any way of getting superpowers, but rather not being subjected to our natural weaknesses. Secondly, you were mentioning Potter, and I think that's the third time it was mentioned in this forum, and I've already attended some big bioethical events in which nobody mentioned Potter. People who were just referring to medical ethics in a very narrow sense. So Potter was not only talking about the merging of the natural and the sciences and the and humanism or social sciences. He was also talking about merging disciplinary perspective with holistic perspective, and that's something which ought to be remembered. And thirdly, of course I agree that if we change something in the genome, we are going to make a change. But I'll give an example of my brother, who was about a little taller than me, but thin as I was until he got married about 10 years ago. And he married into a family from a Georgian origin, and they are very big. So he gradually became bigger. And this is also a change which does not require the manipulation of the genome, of just behavior. And in this respect, we have a proverb in Judaism. I try to translate. It means that everything is fixed because God knows everything, but we have the permission to change. Of course, it's paradoxical, but I think that we're talking about gene manipulation, and we already know that there is epigenetics, which means that our characteristic can change not only because of manipulation we directly perform on our genome, but also because of the environment, our personal history, history of our ancestors. For example, there is research that if your grandparents have underwent the Holocaust during World War II, the Jewish Holocaust, you would suffer consequences in terms of health or body weight. So it could be epigenetics, it could be marriage, and it could be direct gene manipulation all at once.
Yeah, you're right. When you you're right. When you are looking just one person, few person. My twin sister had some problem. Now some exam doesn't function, so she has 10 kilos more than it's happening. But the question I was thinking about is about looking humanity as a whole genome. And I put Potter because Potter have this question. Whatever compromise our existence is not reasonable. So, is it reasonable to manipulate and then cannot control? Because you cannot control. It's very precise. It's very all the things, but you cannot control. That's why I put the biotechnoscience. That discuss these ways of artificial manipulation of a natural thing that after the manipulation would have their own process, their biological process. So after that you cannot control. So that's the question. Thinking about genome as a patrimony, should we manipulate with no control? That's the question. Because the Chinese have done, I don't know, I couldn't find the paper, I even put the photo, because I put the photo that I choose, or I found the paper. They have no paper, they have no clinical trial proposed, I don't know. So, maybe he have done this, 2 babies, I don't know, maybe we have already some manipulation. It's a very insignificant when you think about the number of people, but still is a changing of our patrimony. That's the question, it's more philosophical than biological. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Carla, please. Yeah.
And then we have to change our...
We have to move at 4 o'clock, which is in 1 minute.
Yeah, I just really briefly wanted to mention, and I'll go into it also in my talk, the juxtaposition of the talk just before yours with Buddhism and your talk with transhumanism and these questions around it. And then, of course, within all of our spiritual traditions, whether Buddhism or Christianity or any of them, the idea that we are made in the image of the higher potential, and the Buddha says we enter the path to realize the deathless, and that the transcendence is within us, that we are in fact the immortal one or the deathless one. But then the question of what is the role of how we work with medical science that contributes to us realizing it, and what is detrimental to the higher spirit realizing its place.
But I'm pretty sure we will have a post-human kind.
It's complex.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I guess. Go ahead.
If I'm not mistaken, that Potter is also the new discipline. I mean that he defined the new discipline as bioethics, a new discipline, and compared with the previous concept that discussing about ethical, legal, and social implication of some subject or topics. But you also discussing about transhuman. So my question is whether in the future there will be good people, and bad people or the criminal will decrease or will disappear, or maybe.
Very interesting question, because the porter, the guy I mentioned here, he had a part of discussion that he told something like, maybe the next, maybe the chosen model would be the less intelligent. It's very interesting, because I'm seeing this in Brazil by now. So we choose a guy that it's a kind of crazy thing. To see people not thinking about social issues, not thinking about community, or not thinking about politics, just thinking about moralistic patterns. So I think it's a kind of not using intelligence. So sorry for talking about my country, but anyway. When I wrote this, I think myself, it's this. Evolution is changing for one generation to another generation. Yeah. Whatever you have whenever you have a changing on frequency of genes, gene frequency, in genotype frequency, you have evolution. What's that characterize evolution? And this changing can be to any direction. Not the direction I think is the better. We see this in several animal models, but maybe for human intelligence would not be important. I just think about intelligence, but enhancing the different or changing in the different way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nilza. So yes, and also who is to judge what is good or not? It's that's one of the points that we discussed today. Thank you.